My guest today is Jason Boone. If you're watching this, you might even recognize this set. Since 2016, Jason's been teaching people motion graphics animation and slowly over time has been going towards making map animations. This has led him to work with some of the biggest YouTubers out there.
There's one really interesting story that made me respect Johny Harris a lot.
We talked about making a living creating on the internet.
After those first 4 years, I was like, oh, this is livable off YouTube and freelance. You know, it's comfortable. And now it's become like, oh, it's like seriously, it's seriously livable.
The volatility of it, using maps to tell a story and having your work seen by millions of people. This episode is sponsored by Planet. If you work in the satellite image world, you probably already know about Planet. They're one of the biggest providers of high-frequency, high-resolution satellite imagery today, and their open, accessible platform integrates seamlessly with different GIS platforms, making it easier to access their high-cadence, pre-processed data, allowing you to focus on the analytics. Now, historically, getting access to high-cadence, high-resolution satellite imagery has been overly complicated and time-consuming. This is something that gets often discussed on this podcast. Planet has direct integrations for desktop GIS software like QGIS or ArcGIS Pro and continues to develop flexible APIs to build custom imagery pipelines. They also recently acquired Synergize, the company behind Sentinel Hub, giving even more options to get access to Planet imagery. Most of the work we should be doing should be focused on the analysis, not on getting the imagery. To learn more, head over to planet.com/GIS. I'll have a link in the show notes. Thank you again to Planet for sponsoring this episode. You told me you already know how I start these.
I do.
So you know what's coming.
I do. Are you switching it up on me?
No. So, yeah, as you know, I like starting these conversations with the same question every time. I like asking people how they would describe themselves. So how would you describe yourself?
The go-to, I think, is YouTuber at this point because I have my own YouTube channel and I also run another YouTube channel. And but there's a lot of, I think, things that come along with saying YouTuber. People think of like Mr. Beast. So I like to say video producer sometimes. But then other times, I think there's other things that go along with that where people think, oh, video producer, he works in Hollywood or he works for a TV station. So it's kind of difficult. But I think YouTuber is probably
Right.
the best.
Do you say that like if you meet people, I don't know, like we were picking your kids up at school, like if you talk to other parents, is that what you tell them? Like I always like figuring out when you talk to different audiences of people, like there's the people on the internet that are kind of in the same world as what you do. And then there's the people in the street, the people you meet. What do you tell them the same thing?
Yeah, pretty much now. It's with I live in France, and for the French government, it's kind of difficult explaining what I do. So I think my wife and I have finally, after years, we've settled on digital content creator.
Okay.
But yeah, I tell everybody YouTuber now. And even my mother-in-law is always like, I still don't understand what you do. And for years, my dad has been like, when are you going to get a real job? You know what's going on? So it's classic.
And do you get, like, what kind of answers do you get? Do you get the, like, Mr. Beast or?
No, people always ask what the channel is about or
Okay.
what I do. And then that can be, I explain that I do Adobe After Effects tutorials. And a majority of the time, it's blank stares. It's a conversation is always the same. Like, do you know what Adobe is? And they're like, yeah, I know what Adobe is. Do you know what After Effects is? No. Do you know what Photoshop is? Yeah.
Right.
And then basically explaining like motion graphics.
Yeah.
And then I try to explain the cartography aspect of it and the mapping. And then I usually lose people with that. Even when people go and watch it, they're like, oh, okay. You know, they still don't
it's
get
like,
it.
oh, it's nice. I no idea.
Yeah.
How did you end up doing that? And the reason I ask is this notion of, even if we go with the French government definition of content creation, like that didn't really exist 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So can you walk me through like how you end up being a YouTuber?
Well, I'm guessing you want the long story because we're
Sure.
on the pod. Yeah, okay. So I studied television production at university. Well, if we go way back, how did I get interested in video?
Yeah.
I was a teenager and my brother, I have an older brother, and I always did what he did. So he would get into something and I would get into it by default. He got into skateboarding. I started skateboarding. So he had a phase of like having a video camera and doing video editing. So I obviously got into that, and he kind of got out of that phase, but it kind of stuck with me. And I started to shoot skateboarding videos and really fell in love with that. Started making skate videos for like years. And I was about 19, 20, and my mom was like, "Look, you need to figure out what's going on. You need to pick something, figure out."
1920?
Yeah, like I was basically going to community college, like trying to figure out what I wanted to do because I didn't know.
I'm sorry, I don't. Oh, you were.
I was 19 or 20
sorry.
years
I was
old.
like
This wasn't 19,
yeah.
20. I'm not that old.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
I'm taking you back.
So you're
the First
20.
World War is coming to an end. No.
And you're vlogging.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I was 19 or 20 years old, and my mom was like, "All right, you need to, take some electives." We good?
Yeah.
She was basically, we need to figure out what you want to do. She wanted to help me out, and she's like, "You really like shooting videos and editing. Maybe you could get into that. Take some electives in college and see if you like it." And during that time, she was working for a zoo, and there was a videographer who came in, and she took his card and said, "Call this guy. He works for the local TV station. Maybe he can go in and volunteer or something." I said, "Okay, cool." And I did. And the guy, his name was John, super, he became my mentor, and he was so gracious with me and let me volunteer. The first day I volunteered, he took me to like a school board meeting. It was like a live shoot at a school board meeting. And I was kind of like just fascinated with the live camera, like 4-camera shoot with the whole crew. I was like, "This is amazing." And he's like, "Oh, you like this, huh?" Because it was a boring school board meeting. He's like, "We could bring you on as a freelancer if you think this is interesting." And I said, "Okay, yeah, absolutely." So I started working at the TV station, and that basically, I fell in love with video production. Started working at the local TV station. So by the time I graduated, they ended up hiring me full time. So I was basically a production specialist, setting up studios and doing live shoots and going out on field production things with field. This is 2004, 2005. I graduated in 2006, and then I had the full-time job. But at the same time, I was still shooting my skateboarding videos, and that was starting to take off too. I ended up getting connected with, way back in the day, Al Gore started a television network called Current TV. And someone told me about it at the TV station. They're like, "Hey, you're shooting all these cool skateboarding videos." Because I was getting hardcore about the skateboarding videos. I rented like a local movie theater to premiere skate videos.
Okay.
And
because there's like no YouTube.
Yeah,
back
this
then,
was
right?
this was
As well.
right before YouTube.
Yeah.
Right, YouTube was like 2005, I think, and this was right around that time. I rented a movie theater for my skate video in 2004, and one of my colleagues at the TV station was basically like, "Hey, there's this new youthful television network that accepts viewer-created content. You should submit something." So I checked it out. I did. I don't remember how I did it. Uploaded, snail mailed something in. And a producer contacted me and said, "Hey, it got randomly picked, featured by a producer." And then the producer contacted me and said, "Hey, we want to buy this little clip that you sent in." I think I sent him like a montage, and I called it "The Pissed Off Skateboarder." And it was my friend just like having a, breakdown, breaking skateboards and throwing stuff. It was just a stupid, little funny clip. And the producer contacted me and said, "Hey, we're looking for people to use as what they called shredditors or predators, which were producer editors that they could send out to the field and basically produce like little short form documentaries." And did I mention this is Current TV? Current TV. And so I ended up freelancing for them while I was in college as well. So it was kind of like this film school it was really amazing. I was learning how to do short form documentary work, which I loved. So by the time I graduated, I wanted to get into documentary film. That's what I wanted to do. It's just fascinating.
Sorry if you mentioned, what did you graduate in?
TV production.
Okay, so you are studying, and at the same time, you're getting that field experience.
Yeah, it was amazing. I absolutely loved it. And it was, and like, man, huge shout out to my mom for giving me that first push and kind of guiding me. And then John, it's just I had these key people in my life that really... Right. And John was great. John, my boss at the TV station, would come out and shoot skate videos with me. He paid for half the movie theater when I rented it. He's just a great guy. He's amazing. And he used to like help me with like give me certain equipment that I could go out and use. He let me use equipment for the TV station on my skate videos when I started working there. And yeah, even it was amazing with Current TV. I had a piece come out, and when our documentaries or our current journalism pieces came out, they would have a little image of the producers that would come up on screen. So I went to school one day in one of my TV production classes, and the guy's like, he's like, "Hey, did I see you on Current TV?" And I was like, "Yeah, that was me." It was wild, like
That's
to be
pretty cool.
recognized.
Yeah.
It was very cool. And so yeah, that was amazing. And graduated, went to the TV station, started working full time as just a production specialist, and worked there for about 8 years until. And while I was working there, I basically started using Adobe After Effects to do motion graphics and animation, and I fell in love with it there. I was like, wow, this software is so interesting, and motion graphics was just fascinating. And you talk to anybody who uses After Effects, it's just fun using it. So I became kind of a pretty good After Effects user. So by the time I worked at the TV station for about 8 years, and then one day I was heavy into travel. I was like just loved travel, and I'd always had a bucket list item of leaving on a one-way trip, just doing an open-ended trip where you just backpack and like vagabonding style. So I went to do that, and when I quit my job, I had saved up a little bit of money, and then I basically just kind of did the leap without any backup plan or safety net, no job. So when I quit and started just traveling around vagabonding, I was looking for little freelance gigs, and I started doing blog writing for filmmaking websites, which turned into video tutorials. And then that turned into After Effects tutorials. And Premiere Pro started off as Premiere Pro and After Effects. Premiere Pro is the video editing software. And then right around the same time, this was 2016. So when I quit, I was like, what the heck? I'm a video production guy. I need a YouTube channel because YouTube's huge at this moment.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what am I doing? I need a YouTube channel. So I started my YouTube channel at the same time.
And you're still traveling at that point?
Which is called Boone Loves Video. Yeah, I started my YouTube channel. I went on my trip in April of 2016, I think, March or April of 2016. And I really got the channel cranking probably that same year at some point.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, so I started this YouTube channel called Boone Loves Video, and I just started teaching tips and tricks of how to use Premiere Pro and Adobe After Effects. And then that turned into like filmmaking, camera reviews, all kinds of different things. Yeah.
Do you miss the documentary side sometimes?
Yeah, the gig with Current TV was very cool. It was only 4 or 5 years that I was kind of working as a freelancer for them, and some of the stuff we did was really amazing. Like I did a short form documentary about funeral directors one time, and I got to go like to a funeral directors conference, and I was working with a producer, and she was telling me like, hey, we're looking for like stories like this. We'll thread these 3 stories together, and we can build a narrative out of this. And must have been like 24, 25 when I did that piece, and it was just learning so much. And that piece turned out was so interesting. And a lot of the pieces that I did for Current TV were like that. And I did some kind of breaking news stuff as well. Like they had a tornado hit near where I lived one time, and they sent me out. They're like, hey, go talk to people that have experienced the tornado. So it's a lot of journalism type stuff.
I'm asking because if you move towards even the camera reviews and the tutorials, it's a different thing that you're showing. You're teaching people how to do the thing,
right?
But you're not doing the thing as much. Well, you're putting the tutorial together. I think you see what I mean.
Yeah.
You're not creating. You're showing other people how to create their own stuff,
right,
with these new skills,
right. And a lot of the times when I approach a tutorial, I'll figure out something. Sometimes I can pull from something that I've done, and I'll start the tutorial like, this is something that I did in a freelance gig, or this is something I've done in the past. Here's an example. Not all the time. And then other times I'll just create something and say, here's what I think that's the best way to start a tutorial. Say, here's what you're going to learn how to create.
Yeah.
So that right up front, they know like the quality of it. So they right up front, they'll know that's not what I want to create, or, oh, cool. And they'll stick around. But with the documentary work, I think I realized really quickly I wanted to do a feature documentary, which I did. I did like a 50-minute documentary, which I got like a small distribution deal. And I just didn't see any like business model way to sustain that as a career. I just couldn't see it as like, how could I do this as a living aside from like going to another production company? It just didn't seem like seemed like pretty stressful life that I couldn't really, wasn't clear to me.
So feature film is these like big, long, the ones you go see at the cinema.
Well, the one I did at the time, I did one in 2008 or 9. And at that time, I got some little distribution deal for it to go out on iTunes and like Amazon. And
Okay.
at that time, now I think you can kind of self-distribute that way. But right at that time, it was kind of between the transition of that. And I got some kind of education deal where it got put out in libraries as well. And it was just, yeah, right away, I was like, this is not what I want.
Tell me about maps.
So maps, yeah, I guess it's kind of a weird, I'd always been interested in cartography and maps. And I guess that dates back to like, I have really vivid memories of my dad's dad. Like he had this room of all these National Geographic magazines. So we'd go into this room and it was just like this insane, like, the whole wall was just National Geographic. So it was like this glowing, like magical thing when you go in there, and he had like so many different, just a huge collection. We'd go in there and there were so many maps and a lot of those that were cool. And one year for Christmas, that grandpa bought me an atlas. He bought me 2 National Geographic atlases. I think it was like Our World and Our 50 States, like 1989 probably. I still have them. And yeah, he told me, he's like, hey, you need to go see the world. Like, this is going to help you, blah, blah, blah. And that was a very, like, striking memory. And I'd always been interested in maps. And I kind of didn't realize it until I was doing the After Effects tutorials. And I was working for this company called Premium Beat, which is owned by Shutterstock. And I was doing tutorials for them. And I started to notice, I think at one point somebody put in the comments, like, what's with the maps? And I was like, what are you talking about? And I noticed that I was using maps in all my tutorials, like as examples. And I'd gone to this, I was living in London for a bit, and I went to an exposition, some kind of exhibit at the British Library for maps. And I bought a book there that had a bunch of like vector, it had a CD with it, it had all this artwork, and it had vector graphics. And I was like, oh, I can use this stuff for my tutorials. So I bought it and I started using all these map elements in all my future tutorials after that. And suddenly people started to notice that it was map related. And I started to lean into it a little bit. I was like, oh, I'm going to get some more serious kind of map content here. And what that led to was I just started to look at mapping tools, and just really basic like mapping tools. And what happened, the key moment was when I did Google Earth Studio came out. I don't know when it was officially like released in beta preview or whatever, but I saw a clip on Twitter of a Google, like a 3D Google Earth animation. And I was like, wow, did somebody screen record that? Because I'd been tinkering with that. How can you export an animation of a Google Earth clip? And I saw a beautiful thing with just a beautiful animation of New York City, maybe, with motion graphics incorporated. And I was like, how did they do this? And then I saw the hashtag Google Earth Studio, started to research it, found the program, and I was so shocked that they had designed it around Adobe After Effects, like the interface. And not only that, it worked with Adobe After Effects. Like you could export directly to Adobe After Effects to composite your motion graphics. So immediately I jumped all over it, and I was reading all the documentation of Google Earth Studio. I joined. It took like a month at that point. This was 2018 or 19. And I applied to get access, and it took like a month just to be able to get in to use it. So it's basically a browser-based animation tool that you can keyframe movements on the globe, zoom in, zoom out, lat, longitude, and pitch, and move your camera around, and then export it out. And not only that, you can export the camera 3D tracking data, which you can then bring into Adobe After Effects, which means you can then do a composite. It's still like a flat 2D plane. It does a little trickery, but it was incredible. So I started to play with that, and I produced a tutorial about it that went viral, went crazy viral. And it was basically like, I don't remember what the title of it was, like Google Earth Studio and After Effects is fire or something stupid. And
Very
then,
YouTube.
yeah, and then I think it was like a bunch of emojis. And after that, it just went crazy viral. And then the product manager of Earth Studio reached out to me, and I had a message from this guy who's like, "Hey, you want to jump on a call? I'd love to talk to you." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna work for Google." I thought he was gonna hire me or something to make videos. So I get on a call with this guy, Patrick, I think his name was, and I got to talk with like the Earth Studio guys, like the engineers and the product manager, which was very cool. And they were like, "Hey, what would you want to see? Like, what do you think? Like, what would you want to see changes on this?" And I'm like, "For real?" It's like, well, it'd be cool to, add like opacity to your KML paths, and they did. They made the changes I suggested, which was just like blew my mind. And so that was very cool. And then also after that happened, it was kind of like a flood of emails for freelance work. Like a guy from the National Park Service reached out and said, "Hey, can you make a map for this meeting? We animated the Freedom Trail in Boston, I think it is, with Google Earth Studio, and he used some map in his presentation, and there was just a flood of like freelance offers. And not only that, people were asking like, "Hey, how does this?" I think I got a comment that basically said, "Hey, how does Google Earth Studio compare to GeoLayers?" And I was like, "What's GeoLayers?" And then I started to research that along with all these other mapping tools. And before I knew it, suddenly people were calling me Map King. Like within the next year, I was not only just incorporating like map elements in my motion graphics,
Right.
I was reviewing these semi-professional cartography tools, GIS tools, because GeoLayers is like pretty much I would call it a GIS tool.
So can you explain like a super high level of what it is?
GeoLayers is basically allows you to bring geodata inside of Adobe After Effects and generate vector shapes inside of, because After Effects works with both vector and raster, but so it allows you to bring in the base map imagery, and then it will just draw out the vectors directly on the map. And then it also has like points and polygons and a lot of these kind of GIS spatial analysis tools that are it's a bit limited, but it's incredibly powerful. And the learning curve, I found out that the learning curve is quite steep apparently. So not only did I become like this mapping guru on YouTube, but then it really got into GeoLayers because I found GeoLayers and I realized how powerful it was. I was like, this tool is insanely cool. So I became like a Google Earth Studio GeoLayers expert, and that led into a bunch of GeoLayers freelance as well. I started to get all these GeoLayers job offers, and that's GeoLayers. You can do a lot more with GeoLayers. Right. While you can get the crazy cool 3D imagery with Google Earth Studio, at that time the licensing options were quite limited. You couldn't use Google imagery, and it was very limited use cases. I think that's recently changed quite a bit. But with GeoLayers, you could, I think it was Mapbox at the time. Now they have a deal with MapTyler, and there's a lot of different options that you can do with GeoLayers.
And it's like once you start noticing it, you see it in like a lot of the
Oh
Vox
yeah,
videos and all
yeah,
these explainer videos on YouTube
yep,
that have these maps. Like that's
yeah,
kind of the tool that all these people use.
yeah. And I didn't realize that until I started using it, and then suddenly I became like the GeoLayers guy. I became besties with the developer of GeoLayers, and he's
That's cool.
I really love these relationships with developers, because I started another series on my channel called Tuesday Tools, where I was just profiling After Effects plugins, and the devs would always just reach out and they're like, "Oh, hey, what do you think of it?" And they just love to hear your feedback, like what you want to change, and they just anytime they can get with you to get feedback on the product they've been working so hard on, it's great. So this turned into kind of a big revenue stream of affiliate marketing, where I became affiliates for all these developers who were putting out these products for Adobe After Effects, which turned into a cool way to monetize things on my channel.
We talked a little bit about this yesterday, and you told me that if I understood correctly, there was this moment where you're like, "Whoa, I'm getting really deep in this what seemed very narrow niche of thing." Like if you start doing anything on the internet, everybody tells you, "Oh, find a niche, like find a thing that you do." But when you hear people talk about it, they're like skateboarding as like that is a tiny niche, but once you start digging into these, you realize actually it's like way deeper. But can you maybe tell me a bit more about that? Like, did you have moments where you took a step back and you were like, wait, is this too small? Is this too narrow? I'd be curious to know, yeah, how you went about thinking about that, and if there were moments where you tried to pull back or lean into it.
Right. Yeah. So I think after I was following like whether I should, I wouldn't call myself the best YouTuber, but like at that time I was kind of considering like, should I be jack of all trades or should I be like a kind of a broad Premiere Pro After Effects guy who just does After Effects tutorials and general After Effects tutorials? Or should I like really find a niche that is very targeted? And I was kind of an anti niche. I wanted to be more jack of all trades until I got into the cartography stuff. And I started to see after the Google Earth Studio video, all these freelance offers come in, and I thought, oh, there's definitely like an underserved market here that I would like to kind of test out. And after that first year of really, once I got into the geolayers world, I was like, okay, there's something serious here, and I'm gonna lean into it. And I think it was around 2021. In the new year, I decided, okay, my goal this year, it's going to be all maps, all cartography. So it's going to be, I'm going to accept any map job I get. I'm going to try to get map freelance work, like serious map freelance work. And all my tutorials are going to be map related to try to get that freelance work. So I think I had a goal of like, I would like to try 50% of my revenue from map freelance, cartography freelance, or GIS freelance, or whatever, use whatever term you want. And 50% would be YouTube, affiliate marketing, and that world. And as soon as I did that year, it was just like a crazy response. So I leaned in, and it was everything was there. It was like, wow, okay, yeah, there's people are hungry for this. There's like tons of YouTubers that are doing geopolitical content. Mm-hmm. There's just, so I thought this was a niche. I was like, mapping, this would be a cool niche. And I leaned in, and then I suddenly realized that, oh, geospatial is everything, all data can be kind of, placed on a map. So basically all these different industries. And I started to realize that with the freelance offers I was getting. Like, I think there was a company called Flood Map, maybe. It's doing flood risk kind of analysis. I was doing animations for them, doing a little bit of stuff for National Park Services, and then just huge, like doing tons of different little documentaries. People, there was a guy who cycled across the United States on some trails. We were mapping that out, showing what states he's going through. And then you have travel vloggers, ton of stuff. Yeah. And journalists, there's a lot of work with journalism.
One of the things I was curious to ask you about is I work in the whatever again we want to call it, GIS, geospatial, whatever field, where people are very focused on the data, and creating those data sets is incredibly hard. Like, you want to create an elevation model of a country. It's actually a lot of engineering that goes into it, but that's the field. It's a lot of math and physics and flying planes or satellites. That is very far removed from film production and trying to tell a story. And there's a moment where those two worlds have to meet, where the animator, film producer needs to get those images from the engineers. Right. I mean, even if it's done through agencies. I'm really curious to hear if you had moments where you were like, this is really hard to get, or on the flip side, oh, this is just, I can get whatever I want. Because so far you've been saying you've used Google Earth Studio, which is like they've built that tool. But I'm curious if you tried looking around for other sources of data, and I'm really curious to know how that might have gone.
The data was definitely the former of what you said. It was incredibly hard and convoluted and confusing trying to find data sets in the beginning, just not understanding the terminology. And I didn't come into this using QGIS or ArcGIS Pro and being a GIS pro, so I didn't know a lot of the terminology. And even, I started to follow a lot of people on Twitter to try to figure out the world. But the data collection, I would say, is one of the hardest parts of the process of trying to find clean data of what you're trying to map. So, and I still struggle with that quite a bit. I'm getting better at it, but trying to find, usually when you're working with freelance, a lot of these freelance jobs are pretty simple. I've never been hired to do incredibly difficult things. I've done a couple of COVID maps or visualizations. That was probably the hardest thing I've ever done.
In terms of the data, of like
Yeah, in
getting
terms of
accurate
like
stuff.
finding the data and making sure it's accurate. Like, what are the
Okay.
sources and what are the dates of the sources, and then you have like a span of time that you're trying to animate across, which is always can be complex.
Right.
But that's really the power, I would say, of map animations, is that you can show things over time. You know, that's what it is. So that's its strength, I would say. And yeah, it's definitely a huge, it's kind of everything, and the data is everything. So it's a hard part, and you know, I'm constantly struggling to get better at that. But most of the things I get hired for are pretty easy. Like, this is a route. Sometimes I have to manually create a route.
Okay.
It's a little difficult. Like, I have to tinker a lot with GPX files.
Okay.
You know,
Right.
but it's not, or like make custom vector features. You know, it's pretty straightforward. I'm not working with like complex, like migratory patterns of birds in the 70s or something.
And I guess the point is to make it look good rather than be perfectly accurate. And so you can get away with.
Well, that's a balance. It depends on the content. It depends on what you're showing. Because if you're doing journalism, you know, some of the you got to be careful, and like you got to like show your sources, and you got to like verify those sources, and also just make sure that it's accurate. Again, I've never done anything that's heavily, and I shouldn't be doing things that are regulate. Like, obviously, somebody's going to be using a map that can get them killed or something. It's never anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you want to be. You know, I just try to do the best job possible with verifying the sources and making sure. You know, design's a whole nother part of it. There's so much that goes into it. You know, like map design is such a huge part. So I'm constantly trying to get better. Because I struggle with all parts of the process, the design and the data collection, all that. It's all its own art. So you just try to do the best job possible in every aspect of the process.
One of the way I heard about your work is through seeing you did some animation for Johny Harris, which I bring up because I think is probably one of the biggest. This is also the moment where you're like, what is he actually? But let's say YouTube journalists or journalists that does their work on YouTube, that's very heavily reliant on video and then animation. And I'd love to know a bit more about how that was, just working with Johny and working with a team like that, and working where you know that your work is going to be seen by millions of people.
Yeah. It was thrilling. Like, the way that went down was I started making this series called Make a Map Like, and it was just like make a map like these different popular YouTubers.
Right.
And then Vox was obviously a big one. I was trying to get in with Vox for a while. I was like pinging the people who work there, like, hey, look at this animation. You guys want to hire me? I'll make animations for you, because I think they're kind of the gold standard for a lot of, you know, design people.
Well, a lot of these, like Johny, Cleo, like they all, which are becoming these really big people, they all came out from Vox.
Yeah, Cleo's huge now. She's huge. And yeah, basically what happened with that was I did a video, and by the way, pro tip, if you want to get some views on YouTube, just make a video about that. Make a video about Vox and use the Vox logo, and you're going to get views. So I did a video called Make a Map Like Johny Harris, and I recreated, I don't remember what the map content was, probably like some San Francisco Google Earth Studio thing. And I made a joke in the description. I was like, here's how you can make a map like Johny Harris. And I said something like, sadly, I don't have his amazing hair. I made like a ball joke or something. And I get DM'd by this guy on Instagram after it comes out. And he's like, hey, man, I loved your video. I used GeoLayers, blah, blah, blah. He's talking. And he's like, I saw your joke about Johny. That was hilarious. I was laughing. And he goes, actually, I work for Johny. I was like, oh, okay, what do you do? He's like, I do the GeoLayers animations. I do a lot of them because Johny was building that right around this time. I think Johny had just gone over 1 million subscribers. So this is 2021. And he's like, I do a lot of the animations for Johny, and Johnny's focusing more on the writing now. So he's building out his team. I was like, wow, that's so cool. And then the conversation was kind of over. I was like, okay, cool. And then 2 weeks goes by, and then I get pinged by him again. And he's like, hey, are you available for freelance? You know, would you want to work on it? I was like, are you kidding me? Of course. Like, yes, I'm available. And then that led to my first job with Johny, which was a piece about volcanoes in Indonesia, which was just like bonkers cool. So I got the experience of working with him, got to jump on calls with him, go to meetings and be part of the team, got on the Slack, which was so cool. Like definitely starstruck, and he's like the coolest guy. And every time I've only done probably 5 or 6 videos for him. I haven't worked for him in about a year now, maybe a little over a year. But yeah, huge learning experience, and definitely made me feel like, okay, I've arrived, because it's,
Yeah.
Johny is a journalist. He's definitely a journalist. He's an Emmy award-winning journalist. YouTube's kind of like the platform. He's a journalist on YouTube. He's been working for the New York Times, working to produce content for their channel. And yeah, the dude's legit. He's like who I go to get most of my information.
Yeah.
And yeah, just working with him was so cool. Like how he took criticism and how the whole process of like feedback, and working with him on his scripts and seeing how, I'm assuming how they do it at Vox, was incredibly impressive. And he definitely helped me with my design, because my designs are usually very lacking. So seeing how he goes about, I told you before, one of the coolest things is he would randomly send me like tutorials. He would record a tutorial and be talking directly to me, like, "Hey Jason, check this out. Let's pre-comp it like this." And I'm just like, like custom Johny Harris tutorial for me. Like that was so cool. So that was I felt really lucky. And shout out to Jack. His name was Jack Joyce. He's the guy that worked for him, who's like this kid genius he just started his own YouTube channel recently. I think I don't know. I don't remember the name of it, but
I'll put it.
Google Jack Joyce, and he's already like, doing very well. He's put out like 5 videos, and of course he's like, going viral every time.
I'm curious, like, to lean a bit more into the using the animations as part of telling a story. I think sometimes either you're on making the data, or even like, oh, there's this cool tool and here it's geo layers. Like, the thing that happens sometimes is you see the world through that lens, in like everything through that, like, oh, I could do this, I could do that. But just because you can doesn't mean it serves the story.
Right.
And I'm really curious if there are moments where working again with a team that's focused on telling the story, and those animations are just a tool. I'm curious to know a little bit more about that dynamic and how that might have gone.
With Johny specifically, or just
Johny as maybe as an example, but any other, if there are ones where there's good examples that come to mind.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. With Johny, it's like definitely all the creative storytelling comes from Johny. He's the writer, and he puts together the scripts, and then he'll give you the key directions for the animations. It's basically like he'll have a list of animations, and then you go and produce them. And there's conversations also about like, how long should the animation be? Like, what specifically do we show? How long do we show it? Like, what's the pacing of it? And how does this serve what we're talking about in this, key moment? Right. So
if I understand correctly, by the time it gets to your hands, it's already, there's barriers around it. It's like, this is the animation that we need to do.
Yeah, a lot of the times
it's not like an open-ended, like, what can we do with this? Like,
yeah, like rarely
Okay.
is the client freelance work like that. Usually it's like somebody has a specific need.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, like I was working for creating like maps of the Bible, like showing specific things, and it's just like, hey, here's the region, we're gonna zoom in, here's the zooms.
I see.
Sometimes it's that specific, or at other times, so usually it's on my own tutorials where I'll have like a little bit of a narrative in there, like, here's what we're gonna show and here's why we're gonna show it. And yeah, to be honest, I really like the technical aspects of it. I geek out about that, as compared to like, this is so cool how we told the story. Like, yeah, that's cool, but I geek out over tech stuff. Sorry, I know you want to dive into the storytelling, but
no. That's what I'm curious about. Is like to be able to make stuff like that, like these really good pieces. You need people who have every skill, and that's why I'm trying to poke around and understand.
That's what's so amazing about good design, is that you can tell a story without. That's kind of what I was interested in when I was in the documentary world. One of the documentaries that I always wanted to do was like just do an entire documentary with no no speaking, like no dialogue. Nobody's really talking. It's like super verite. You just follow people around and you try to basically show some aspect of their life with no sound bites driving the narrative. I always thought that would be fascinating. Maybe I could still make that one day. But I think map animations are so, it's so visual that you can kind of do that. You can kind of deliver so much, give so much context, obviously, via the maps. And with good design, you show, you pick what you want to show. It's super subjective, and yeah, there's so much that goes into it before you even get to the actual motion aspect of it. Like, what scale do you want to show it at?
Yeah.
Are you going to zoom in, and how are you going to, is your base map going to have color? What is the color palette? There's so much.
So let's go on the technical. You said you that's what you like. Like, what do you like about it?
I guess that it's kind of like travel in a way for me. Every time I open up GeoLayers, it's like I'm traveling again. It's like, where do I want to go? What do I want to look at? And like with this tutorial today, I want to go look at this. This would be cool. Let's look at this aspect of this in 3D. And so it's like design. It's just science, art, and design, and everything kind of wrapped up into one, which is just so interesting, and that you can, yeah, it's just a kind of a way to travel. If I'm stuck at home, I can always travel just by opening up GeoLayers and tinkering around, or Google
Right.
or Studio. Like, it's just fascinating.
I mean, yeah, you're preaching to the choir at this point. I can get behind that.
And then GIS as well. I've been super interested in becoming more knowledgeable with what pros do, what like a real cartographer does, and what real analysts do when you're doing like a spatial analysis. Who's the audience? What's the purpose? And like, what were the design choices that went into it? And was there time spent on design that went into it? And what's the function of the map? So that's just such a huge world. Yeah. And that's what's fascinating about all these podcasts. It's been interesting learning about industry pros that way.
Has there been anything surprising, like in coming in? Like, I told you, like, one of the things I found exciting about talking with you is that you come from the video production, visual effects side, and then stumble on this world that has just a ton of data, doesn't really know what to do with it.
Yeah. It's I've noticed that there's a lot of people that are kind of the same way. They come from a different, I've always found like that when you have like an illustrator put together a map, it's always fascinating, or like a designer, someone with strong design skills, because you can see it. And then they bring some, like, always the best documentary filmmakers didn't study documentary film. They're like anthropologists or ethnographers or whatever that go into the field, and they have this other, they're blending the two. Like that. That's why I think my tutorial went viral, because you're taking two things that people love, After Effects and Google Earth Studio, and it's just like an explosion of coolness, Yeah. So.
And so now there's another layer that comes in, is like you join a tech startup.
Yes. Yeah. This is, so what happened with this? So there's this company called Felt. I'm sure everybody's heard of it. I don't need to explain that. Everybody's heard of it. And
can you still do that though? Just for hypothetically, if people haven't.
Basically, it's the best place to make maps on the internet. It's a browser-based web mapping tool. It's a web mapping tool that is basically approachable by, it's easily approachable, yet it's incredibly powerful. Just recently, last week, we've introduced Felt 2.0, which has new spatial analysis tools. So I highly suggest everybody go check it out, especially if it's still 2023 when you're watching this. You'll be able to use all the features for free and try them out, because in 2024 they're introducing their pricing tiers. Mm-hmm. So those will be behind paywalls. So I definitely urge people to go check them out. So they hired me. I'm essentially their social media manager, but they hired me because of my YouTube prowess, I guess. And so I'm working to really, my primary goal with them is to build up their YouTube channel, but I'm slowly becoming in charge of all of their social platforms. And basically making tutorials about how to use Felt and how you can use it with QGIS. And I'm still running my YouTube channel at the same time. And the way this went down was it's kind of Murphy's Law. I had released a premium course earlier this year about geolayers, my first one, just experimenting with it. I've been experimenting with Patreon, just experimenting with revenue streams for my own channel. Released this premium course on geolayers, and it did like shockingly well because people have been asking me for it for years. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do it one day. And I did it. Huge response. It was way more successful than I thought it would be. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna set aside. I'm gonna no more freelance. I'm gonna build some premium courses, and I could probably sustain myself. This with the Patreon, and the affiliate marketing is enough for like a salary here. It's enough to make a living. So
Can
that
I,
was
if you're comfortable, can I ask you like a ballpark of how much that is? Like altogether.
altogether.
You don't have to, you can tell me to.
No, I don't. Yeah, the specific numbers are a little weird, but let's say it this way. I had a salary at the TV station, right? It took me probably 4 years of working on the YouTube channel to get back to that number.
Okay.
And then like within the last two, it's been like it doubled. Like basically
Okay.
that number has doubled. Like, and now it's just like but all of this is volatile, so it's hard to give a
Yeah,
number
yeah,
and think like that's going to be the number. The affiliate marketing is volatile. The premium course, that could have been my one hit premium course. Like the next one I
yeah,
release
yeah.
could be a dud. So it's only in the last 2 years, probably 2021 and 2, where I started getting like a lot of freelance. And Johny Harris was obviously a huge thing. Like that got me a lot of exposure. And I try not to like, I could be talking about that a lot more on YouTube and it would be good for me, but it's just kind of like, I don't want to like
I get
use
that.
him to pimp myself out. But yeah, it's sorry, I feel weird with the numbers thing, but
No, that's fine. That's why I tell you, if you're not comfortable, that's fine. Like, I'm just asking a bunch of random questions here. And if there's anything.
basically it was like after those first 4 years, I was like, oh, this is livable off YouTube and freelance. It's comfortable. And now it's become like, oh, it's like seriously,
Yeah, it's
it's
nice.
seriously livable, but not that much, but it's
Yeah.
but again, I don't know if it's sustainable. That's the thing. It's also volatile. You gotta, YouTube is volatile. I don't make good money off the ad revenue, Google AdSense. I do not make really good money off that. It's quite low. I would think for the size of my channel, but all the other stuff, affiliate marketing is pretty good. My Patreon did surprisingly well, and now the premium course has done surprisingly well. So the point of this story was in mid this year, I think right after the release of my course did so well, I was like, okay, freelance, I'm done. I'm gonna taper off my freelance work, and I'm gonna do premium courses, and I'm just gonna accept only amazing freelance offers. Like I'm gonna be very
It's a
picky.
great place to be.
And I thought I would just be like, no more freelance. So I make this decision, right? I'm like, no more work. It's gonna be, and I decided I had my next idea for my premium course, and I'm like, I'm focusing the rest of 2023 on this premium course that I had. So I start working on it. Worked on it for about a month, and then this lady from Felt reached out and said, she said, hey, there's this position at Felt, and we think it would be perfect for someone in your audience. We're looking for someone to take on our YouTube channel or social media. And she said, would you be willing to announce it, introduce or talk about the position in front of your audience? And then at the end, she said, and we'd like you to apply. And I thought, oh, okay, she really doesn't want me that bad because it's just, like, or you can apply. I'm like, okay, no, I'm busy. I just made this thing. I don't want to like, I'm working on my course, and I just made the decision, like, no more freelance, no more jobs. I'm going to focus on my stuff. And then I announced it. I think I waited a little while and I announced it on Twitter or something. And she immediately wrote back and said something like, oh, hey, thank you so much for doing that. But would you, and then she said something like, would you be interested in like a medium short-term contract? And then I was like, oh, she's interested in me. Like, she wants, and I had already told a bunch of people like, hey, apply for Felt. And then I went and looked at their website and started to really study what they were doing. And I was quite shocked that I didn't really know what they were doing. I thought it was more of like for some reason, I guess I thought it was more of like a Google My Maps kind of just amateur one-stop shop. And I'd been subscribed to their newsletter, so I was getting some of their things saying like, man, they move fast. Like they put out a lot of updates and they're doing a lot. But when I really dove into it and started reading the bios of people who work there, it was like overnight. something happened. I read it one night, and then the next day I was like, I have to have this job. Like, I am obsessed. Like, I have to have this job. So I put together a video at that point, and to kind of get him interested, just to show him what I could do. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna pitch her. Like, I'm gonna say I'm interested, but I'm gonna like try to go above and beyond. So I did a video on my channel, and then I also did a video like directly to them saying, hey, here's my deal. Because I didn't want to give up my YouTube channel. So I basically said, hey,
Yeah.
I will work for you under the stipulation that I can keep my YouTube channel, have editorial control. And I wasn't sure if they were going to do it. I was like, okay, but if they say no, or if they want me to drop YouTube, which I mean, they want me to use my YouTube to cross promote. I figured that. So yeah, it worked out. She was very receptive, and it just kind of was like everything just kind of went perfectly at the same time. That video did really well, and they saw a huge spike in their signups that day. So it was just all perfect. And then I think I had another video that did perfectly well. And that's how that went down. And well, originally the reason I got kind of tapped in with Felt was because Jack Joyce, who got me the Johny Harris job, genius Jack Joyce. I always joke with him because he'd always send me stuff that was cool. He would always send me like, hey, check this out. And it was like the coolest mapping tool I'd ever seen or something. And I was like, I'm going to start a YouTube series called Cool Shit Jack Showed Me. Like, and it would be amazing because this guy, I don't know how he has enough time in the day to do all this stuff. And he basically introduced me to Felt. He was like, dude, check this out. Like right when they introduced beta or whatever they did in 2000, a couple years ago. He showed me Felt, so I signed up, and I was like, wow, this is very cool. You know, I can do some prepping work for my map animations using this tool. And I joined their Slack community, and that's where I met, her name's Anya. That's where I met Anya, who got me the job. And basically originally I was trying to help Anya get an interview with Johny Harris or something for their blog. And we talked a little bit, you know, in their Slack community. And then she came back a year later. So, and then said, hey, there's this job. And then kind of went from there. And now, so basically I got the job. They gave me like a month trial, and it went really well. Like the first day I did went really well. And it just, again, it was like kind of perfect. It almost felt like kind of destiny type of stuff, because the job and where they're positioned was very much, I feel like, where I was positioned as well, like ramping up and introducing all these pro tools. Like I want to ramp my skills up and become, you know, I was really looking to do something like this. And they had their company retreat like the second week that I was there. And I asked them, it was in Mexico. I was like, can I come? Like, can I please come? It'd be perfect. I get to meet everyone. And they were nice enough. They were like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, come. So I went to the company retreat, and then I realized, like, I met the people on the team and really got to know them. And I was like, okay, like these people are very talented. You know, I joked with them. I was like, it's like I've joined the Harlem Globetrotters. Like, I can't believe I work here and like work with so many people. And now it's pretty crazy. I've only done a few videos on the channel, and I'm still finding my feet because we've had the crazy push to release Felt 2.0 and all the deliverables that are going into that, but getting ready to ramp up the content on the channel. So I'd suggest, don't want to get too salesy here, but definitely go subscribe. Tell your people to subscribe to the Felt YouTube channel. And basically, it's cool now because they have cartographers that work there. They have Mamatha Akela. I'm sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I work closely with her on ideas. So now I basically have this team that I can reach out to. I can talk to the engineers and ask what goes into specific tools. The cartographers can help me with the narrative of the tutorials and ideas for the tutorials. Before, it was just me on my YouTube channel. And I would always wonder, like, do GIS pros think I'm a joke? Like, what is, like, is this a dumb idea? Like, I'm using, you know. And now it's very cool because there's Mamatha, and there's another urban planner that I work with named Juan Pablo, who's just incredible. Like he puts together these things and pitches me ideas that are just amazing, and then he'll sit down and take me through a tutorial. And it's just so much fun. It's so much fun. It's so like all the fun I had in college when I was working while going to school, and it was like my whole life was video production. Like now it's just my whole life is just inundated in mapping. So I'm doing the Felt work, and then I do my map animations on the side. And yeah, Murphy's Law, I said like I wasn't going to take any work. And then I take the most hardcore, like full-time job, you know? And now I'm getting like cool freelance offers as well. Like freelance offers are still rolling in, and it's just like, I'm not obviously not taking those. I can't, but there's just really cool freelance opportunities. So I've decided to build this list of GeoLayers animators that I'm trying to, I just did it the other day. I got a job offer and I just sent out a spreadsheet of GeoLayers animators that I know that are on my Patreon. And I just got an email this morning from the guy. He's like, "Hey, I got a job from this
That's
company
pretty
from
cool.
you." And I was like, "Wow, cool, yeah. I should take a commission."
Yeah.
I need to set that up.
That's pretty sweet. Like when you start feeling like you can connect people, that is wild.
Yeah, those are what thing we were talking about yesterday. That's some of the most rewarding feedback that I ever get when people come to me and they're like, "Hey, I got a job," and it was definitely because of your tutorials and like the stuff I learned from your channel. And I'm just like, "Wow, okay, that's very cool. Now give me money." No, it's very rewarding. And in fact, there was one or two of the animators that got hired and work with Johny now were hitting me up too. They're like one guy was my patron and talking about, different stuff. And then all of a sudden I see him in the Johny Harris Slack and he's like, "Hey, I'm working on this video." I'm like, "Whoa, this is crazy." And I've had some pretty wild experiences. Actually, there's one really interesting story that made me respect Johny Harris a lot.
Mhm.
I really, really, seeing this thing happen from my perspective was really interesting. So I had set up my Patreon page. I'm working with Johny Harris. We do a video. I think it's like How Europe Stole the World. It was like a trilogy, How Europe Stole or whatever. We do the first documentary. It's like a 20, 30-minute piece. It's very intensive. And I'm just the animator. I don't fact check. If I'm working with a journalist, it's up to the journalist to do the fact checking and all that. I will, if I think something's off, I'll say something. But this was like hardcore history stuff that I knew nothing about. It's just like, "Hey, make this map, make this map." And then all of a sudden I start to see there's some hate on the first video. Like, "Hey, some of this is not accurate. You're sensationalizing this, blah, blah, blah." And one of my patrons reached out to me and said, "Hey," he's a historian. And he said, "Hey, a lot of this is quite inaccurate." He's very nice about it. He said, "Hey, a lot of this is quite inaccurate. And I think I want to make a response video." And I was like, "Oh no, like don't like," I was afraid he was going to be like, just negative about it. And there's a lot of people that produce content that's negative and attacking just to get views because they know they'll get views. So he told me the idea and I was like, "Okay, cool. Well, share my link when you get it done and let me know what it looks like." So he releases the video, and at the time his channel was small. He had done like 3 videos.
I think I know who you're talking about.
The present past, I think is the channel's called. Past present past. Yeah, his name's Yoakum, and he releases the video, and I went and watched it, and I was impressed. It was not negative. It was very classy the way he did it. Very, very classy. Like I was shocked. I was like, "This is amazing, incredible." Then I see somebody shares it on the Johny Harris Slack. So I get like a whole bird's eye view of this situation. I see it on the Slack, and I'm like, "Oh, how are they going to respond to this?" And then Johnny's like, "Let's reach out to him." And then Johny released a message on his YouTube community post. He said, "Hey, we're going to do better. I apologize. It's my fault. I take responsibility, blah, blah, blah." And I was really impressed with that. And then he goes on to hire Yoakum and use him as a writer on episode 2 and 3. So like that was another experience where I saw him bring in Yoakum and just as a fact checker and a co-writer on the 2 episodes. And that, of course, that video went viral, and now Yoakum's channel is he's putting out bangers like every he's big. And that was really interesting. So I like love those guys. Like both Yoakum and Johny is so cool. It's so cool to see people that are like that have success that really deserve it.
Yeah, especially when like shit hit the fan.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, this is really testing the waters of because there's like the cool maps, but then there's the integrity of like the stuff that you're talking about.
Right.
Like we're telling stories, we're telling people stuff that exist. And
right.
You can animate whatever you want, but it's important to get it right. And more importantly, to react when you get it wrong. I think I see what you mean.
And it's hard too, being in the journalism world. I would think when you're putting out, when you have a content schedule like that, which I think Johnny's is once a week, it's, and it's hard to, I think it must be very difficult to stay on top of a lot of that, fact checking and keeping everything accurate,
Yeah.
It's important though. Obviously it's kind of everything. So
I wanted to get back to like yesterday we had this whole conversation about like what is it like to work in a tech startup?
yeah.
And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that experience has been like for you coming in from a lot of freelance and not the tech side
Yeah.
and jumping into San Francisco tech startup, like what people think about a startup when people say startup. It's like the pinnacle of what startups are.
Right. Well, it's weird because I'm 40 years old, and I feel like everybody at that company is younger or the same, like, around the same age or quite a bit younger. And my first job at the TV station was very much the opposite. It was like just older people who had a nice job, talked about retirement. We did fun work, and everyone liked the work, but it was very much a different, slow pace. Like a lot of the times I was just in my office, like doing busy work, like training. That's where I training in After Effects because we had not a lot to do.
Right.
And and then so I got into the freelance world, and that was exciting. But yeah, the startup, I definitely had no experience at all. I'm originally from Florida. I have no experience in that world. So being brought on is very exciting. And I've been working by myself for quite a long time now, which I initially really loved. I loved it, and then it starts to get lonely, and then you start to get, my wife kind of pointed out a few times. She's like, you need coworkers. Like, you need to at least go to a co-working space. You need to like get out and like not only interface with people on the internet. You need to work with like collab. So I've been trying to collab with other YouTubers, and so this was another great opportunity. And it was like 0 to 60. It was insane because not only, like I said, that second week I went to the I went to the retreat. So that as well, I was like meeting everyone. I had to give like a presentation every day, on my content strategy and what we're gonna do. And uh, yeah, and just hearing everyone's past and starting to hear about startups and listening to the presentations and learning about how they work is really fascinating. And I really love the pacing. I love that things get done and things, somebody has ideas, they can be incorporated. Um, I like it. I like that it's small. And I've heard that from a lot of people. Like people be like, yeah, I worked at this startup, then it got bigger, I left. I heard that story like over and
Yeah.
over again. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Because you get those levels of management, I guess. And suddenly you can't move as fast, which I guess is natural. But um, it's a really cool place to be. And I'm glad I always said that even when I was working at the TV station before, I was like, I want to work with other young people that are doing things that they're passionate about. Not that those people weren't passionate at the TV station, they were, but it wasn't like their life that, that they like want to live it and breathe it. And so, yeah, it's so cool to be a part of that. Yeah.
Listening to you as I hear you speaking there, I was actually thinking, in many ways, I think a lot of the modern YouTube production companies, like back to Johny Harris, like they're actually quite similar to startups in their own way. It's just that you're
Very
not putting
much.
out software, you're putting out videos. But you
It's
have
it's so similar,
yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Have you seen that overlap? Because you've been in both, like invested differently in them, but
Yeah, it's almost identical, I would say.
okay.
It's very similar. I guess the only difference is that you're not trying to, whatever most startups are trying to do, you're not, that's not what YouTubers are trying to do. I think the YouTubers are more, trying to have, I guess there's just way more long term
Okay.
with YouTubers with a content strategy, whereas most startups, from what I've seen, have an end goal of something that they want to do at the end.
Okay.
Whereas YouTube is just like ongoing, like what's
Yeah.
the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next
Right.
thing? Maybe I'm wrong about that, but
Yeah, we'll see. We'll have like another conversation like in 10 years. And
yeah, again, it's again, I've only been yeah, exactly. Again, I've only been I've only been with felt for like a month, so
Well, that's why it's interesting.
I'm
It's 'cause
very
it's like
fresh, and that's why I'm
You
afraid
get
of.
used to it
I'm really
after.
afraid of sticking my foot in my mouth here. So let me know if I do. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to lose my job that I just got. But yeah, it's. I think I told you before we had this. We could do like a random Q&A with the CEO, and I had a question. I think my question that I anonymously submitted was, "Where are we at in 5 or 10 years?" And somebody asked it in front, like, where are we at in 10 years? And everybody like laughed, like 10 years. Like, and I was like, oh, okay, I see. Things are very, and other ideas, like I pitched certain ideas, like, are we gonna be able to keep this video evergreen? And they're like, ha ha ha. They're like, things change so much. We don't know where we're going to
Yeah.
be, so it's.
Let me take a bit of a step back here. I kind of want to dive into the whole YouTube thing a little bit. I'm curious, do you also like what do you think of the current YouTube landscape today? Like you're someone who makes stuff. Do you watch a lot of YouTube?
Yeah, I do. I've noticed that. Yeah, I do watch a lot of YouTube. Um, I don't know. I think now with there's so many communities that you can find. I really hate when people hate on social media because it's so like when people are just so negative, they think it's the end of the world. Generations before didn't have this. It's a virus, blah blah blah. It's just how you use it.
Yeah.
It's a tool that there are addictive certain things. TikTok is a little scary when I use TikTok and I'm like, oh, okay, this is like I just lost 2 hours or something. That is a little alarming, and it's kind of like mind numbing. A lot of times, mind numbing stuff that you find your way into. Those algorithms trying to control you is scary, but when it comes to like all the things over the years where Facebook groups and Reddit subreddits and things that you can use to find communities that you never had access to before, and all the information age where you can get any information you want, you just need to be able to know where to look and how to find it. And like being able to work with Johny Harris, that would have never happened before, or
Yeah.
these opportunities with Felt never would have happened before. I would have had to snail mail a resume. How would that have worked,
You told me earlier, before we started recording, I think yesterday, you told me you didn't go to film school and you kind of were wondering, like, do I need to do that? Is that I'm getting kind of the same vibe here of like, you can just get a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, the whole idea of school and university in general anymore, I definitely question it now.
Right.
And I have 2 young kids, so
That's exactly what I was going to ask you.
yeah, I think about it a lot, and it's kind of scary because I don't know right now. I don't know. I feel like I could get my kids set up right now. I'm like, get better at your drawing. We'll set up an e-shop. You'll be good. Like, we'll get a little bit of an audience. And I'm like, no, it's horrible. Obviously, I'm not going to do that, but but I could. It's hard to think about. Now living in France, I don't have the added stress of like of the university system being like a crazy business that sends you into debt. I don't have to worry about that whole thing. But yeah, I think when I was that age, like most people, I was like, I want to be a filmmaker. I want to be a director, and there's just no. It's just a dream. And I thought seriously looked at like a couple of film schools, but I wasn't that serious about it. I was like, I don't really see a career here. Even with the documentary filmmaking, when I got into that, I was like, what am I going to move to LA or New York? Like, it's 2
Right.
places I can live. And then I just have to, just didn't seem appealing to me. So that's when I thought, oh, television seems cool and I can get into TV production. And this was right before YouTube. I graduated with my bachelor's in 2006. And I actually joined YouTube in like April of 2005, which apparently,
Wow.
yeah, like even in 2010, 11, I started getting offers. People wanted to buy my channel just because of how old it
Wait,
was.
is that still the same channel you have?
No, I
Oh.
have like a few channels now. That was like my original, yeah, it's just an original channel on with my original email.
It's like 18, that's some serious street cred.
Yeah.
If you're like 18-year-old.
yeah, I have some videos on there they're all private now, but yeah, I got some old. I just go back and watch them sometimes, but yeah, some old stuff on there, which is kind of bizarre. But to your question, which I already forgot what it was.
I wanted to nerd out on some YouTube stuff a little bit, and part of the things I was curious about was like maybe some inspirations or people that whose stuff you really like. Because I also don't like when people say YouTube as this aggregate of stuff. It's like saying cinema or
Hmm.
maybe not, but or Spotify. It's like it's people that are doing the content, and these are just aggregators and moving around.
Yeah.
It's still a lot of work, but what I mean is it's still individual channels, individual people. Um,
It's just it's wild to me how you can find whatever you want. I remember probably over 10 years ago, there's a comedian, Dane Cook, made a joke when YouTube started to become famous. He's like, yeah, you can find whatever you want. He's like, you search for like a guy in a blue shirt with a symbol on it going like this, and like, and you find it,
yeah,
like there's everything's there. And I find that that's quite true. Like anything you want to find, you can find it and build playlists and kind
yeah.
of, you know,
Are
kind of get
there
whatever you want
other
fed to you.
yeah people channels that you come back to that you really like? You talked about Jake Joyce as like one of the people, but
Jack,
sorry,
yeah,
Jack,
yeah.
but you already knew him before. Like, are there people whose stuff we were talking a little bit about that yesterday? Of like, there are these people, they don't put out things very often, but whenever they do, you're like, okay, I'm gonna clear out the calendar and I'm gonna watch this.
I don't find myself following people like that. There's some channels that are like that were very interesting. Some of them probably older. There was one called Every Frame a Painting
Mm-hmm.
when I was in the cinema that like
Yeah.
that was probably one of like the masterpieces that the channel just stopped, and like all the
Yeah.
little essays that he did were magic. And then Nerd Writer was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now I find myself following, I always like to see new YouTubers that are like hitting, and then there's this young kid that's doing After Effects, and I know I'm gonna mess up his name. It's like Maple Berenson, and he does After Effects with a heavy focus on design, which I definitely feel like is one of my weak points. Is like figuring, like cool textures and cool color palettes, and just the motion, it looks amazing. And he's been kind of getting pretty popular. I think he has like 16,000 subscribers now, but he just has a very unique style and seems pretty original what he's doing. I think I found him because he did some map animation stuff that was very
Yeah.
cool and like very original. I was like, oh, this is very interesting. So I've been watching some of his videos, and if you're into After Effects, I definitely suggest you go check him out. And then I have other After Effects buddies that I follow, like Jake Bartlett, and Ben Marriott, of course, is one of the biggest After Effects guys. But for what I watch, yeah, I don't really find myself like subscribing to someone and like getting
Yeah.
updates and like checking out every video. It's more of kind of like a meandering, like, what am I into this week kind of a deal. But YouTube is definitely where I watch content,
Right.
where I watch things more than anything. Occasionally I'll jump off to like Netflix or something else, Disney Plus, Prime Video, but YouTube is the hub.
That is crazy that YouTube is becoming a competitor to Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
yeah, most times, a lot of the times I'll try to find something on Netflix and I just jump over to YouTube because it's.
yeah, it's interesting because the variance, I've thought about that a little bit, like the variance of stuff on YouTube is so high. You get some really terrible stuff. I'm not talking like there's like the obviously terrible production quality, someone filming with a potato and like no just rambling. Like I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about things that are just a waste of time
Mhm.
that are still well produced. But
Right.
then there are these like nuggets of videos that you watch and they're better story and production than Netflix movies
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow.
Yeah. I it's interesting. I feel like the algorithm is pretty good at feeding me what I want. It's actually scary good. If there's one thing that's scary about social media is these algorithms that get you to, it's almost like brainwash. Like I found that I will go to the YouTube homepage and I go there, I'm like, I'm gonna go search something on YouTube. I go to YouTube and then their suggested videos like wipe my brain clean,
Yeah.
and like I'm like, oh, cool. And then I do like save to watch later, save to watch later.
Yeah.
And then 5 minutes later I was like, what did I come here to do? Like, and then suddenly 15 minutes is gone. So that stuff is scary. That
Yeah.
stuff legit scares me. But at the same time it's good at throwing up stuff that I'm interested in. So
Yeah, and then you have this other side, which is like you put stuff out. And so I'm guessing especially like the tutorial things get recommended quite a lot. And
Yeah.
especially if you watch one, you're probably going to watch 5 other ones.
Yeah, but I found that with a tutorial channel, a lot of the times people come to your channel and they'll watch one thing. They're just looking for one thing.
Oh yeah,
They
and
want
then
an answer and
bounce.
then they bounce. And a lot of those people will subscribe to you. So like I've noticed with tutorial channel, it might be easier to get a lot of subscribers and then your view count's going to be low because a lot of those
Mm,
subscribers, like your views for returning script subscribers, I don't know what the key metric is called, but can be quite low based on some other channels. Like if the brand is more around you, like if you're a vlogger, it's much harder to
yeah.
become popular, but I'm assuming you get like pretty hardcore fans.
I want to talk about the like relationship to the analytics. We were talking about that a
Yeah.
little bit. So I'm a data scientist. Anytime you give me a dashboard, data, whatever, I'll see if I can export it as a CSV and like make my own stuff and go through it. And you were telling me, nah, I don't care that much about that stuff.
I do now, but
Yeah,
I
it's
do
your
now with
job.
Felt.
But has that like I'm curious to hear about that.
But my relationship to analytics before was very chill. Before Felt was very chill because it wasn't my job. It was just kind of like a thing that I knew. I feel like I'm very good about not obsessing over it. I have other YouTube friends that were struggling and do the thing where they upload and then they just refresh to
Yeah.
see how their video is performing, and then they change the thumbnail and then they freak out about it. And I don't think that's healthy at all. Like just I'm very much like upload it, do my little promotion checklist, and then move on to the next one. I like thinking about the next idea, just moving on. It's like new clean slate. It's a lot of fun. And now with Felt, it's very much you have, your key metrics that you have to hit goals, and you set goals and you're trying to that's it's it I and I can not stress out about it. I think it's exciting and
Yeah.
kind of gamified, like, oh, how are we going to hit this? It's it's a good challenge. Um, so now it's very much playing the analytics game and trying to figure out what people want, and I think it's just more about figuring out what the audience wants to see, and then
Hmm.
how can that overlap with your goals of like what you want to
Yeah.
produce. And it usually should be heavily on what are people curious about, like what are these Felt people want to do with Felt, and like you got to understand your customer base.
Do you have advice for like people who want to put stuff out on the internet today? Because you've been doing that for a long time.
Yeah, I guess yeah, it's kind of hard to think about this in broad terms, but yeah, just you got to have kind of thick skin and not, you always hear stories about people obsessing. You can get 100 likes and then you get that one dislike, and people obsess over the one dislike. Like, what? Who is that? What? And so you got to be careful with that. And I find myself doing it sometimes. Like, who's this one person who keeps disliking this? It's annoying. And you talk about that, but you don't talk about all the cool stuff that people are liking. So try not to get sucked into the like negativity, and they're just general YouTube tips. If you want to get serious about YouTube, consider it be ready for the long haul. Be ready to put out stuff that possibly people aren't going to watch. It's going to take a little while, possibly, unless you're Jack Joyce. uh, uh, and it's just, you got to stick with it, have consistency. I found that consistency is great as compared to, I've seen just other people that I know put out like 2 videos and then they drop off. And some people don't realize that video production in general is a lot of work. So YouTube for a lot of people is like they get introduced to the world of video production, which I already knew. So maybe that's why
Yeah.
I was kind of like, yeah, I knew the work going into this. I know you have tripods and you have video editing and you have uploading and all this stuff. I already knew the world. So by the time I started doing YouTubing when I was in my 30s, it was like, okay, yeah, this is what it entails. And people don't know how expensive it is either. If you're going to buy video gear and you're
Yeah,
going
we
to
were
get a
doing the
setup.
math yesterday of like how much does my setup cost?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
didn't realize it
Yeah,
adds
yeah.
up.
It's a whole world, and it's a whole art, just like cartography, like the design, what story you're trying to tell, the data, like how clean is the data,
Yeah.
and like what's your source, and and then the motion design in itself is its own art. How are you going to keyframe it? You're going to ease this, what's your velocity incoming, there's so much. It can be overwhelming at times. But another big tip that I found is people give out this tip of like, don't worry about the money. Like, I think you should worry about the money like early. Like, figure out how you can monetize your channel. Think about it and start to play with that early. Don't obsess over it. Don't try to make a living off of it immediately, because that's going to be rare for that to happen. But figure out how you can think about it as a business. Like, how am I going to monetize this? Am I going to do affiliate marketing? Can't really rely on the AdSense if, don't put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to revenue. So try to spread yourself across multiple, because again, a lot of this stuff is so volatile that if one starts to pop, or one drops, which happens, you have another. So that's what happened with my channel, is like affiliate marketing was doing all good. And then it'd be like a certain amount that's pretty high for 1 month, and then it'll drop like way low the next month. So you can't really rely on it. And then what happened about 2 years ago was like all my little revenue streams started cranking at the same time. They were all doing well. And it was like, whoa, okay. And all of a sudden it's like, I don't pay too much attention to it, but all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this is pretty substantial.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, but there's also probably that fear that like that could probably go down all at once.
Yeah, it can go all down at once, but your foundation is better, as compared to if you're like relying on AdSense and then YouTube makes a change and you're like, YouTube. But if you have a healthy Patreon community, you don't have to worry about it that much. Or if you have, other things, you don't have to worry about it.
That was another thing. We talked a little bit about that, like this idea that on the internet now, like this idea of like 1,000 true fans.
Yeah.
And this goes beyond of YouTube or whatever, but I think back to what we were talking about earlier about this idea of finding a niche, or I don't know, I don't really like that word, but finding a bunch of people that you can make stuff for.
Yeah.
You don't actually need that many people.
Yeah.
Like when we first started recording, you're like, yeah, I'm a YouTuber, but not like Mr. Beast. It's like, it's not hundreds of millions of views and subscribers and whatever, but I think there's this misconception that is what you need, but you really don't need that.
Yeah.
And you can make stuff with maps and like a subset of that. Yeah. And there's enough people out there that can be a serious endeavor if you're good at it, which is a whole other thing. But I think that is kind of one of the wildest things about the internet today, is you can make things for a small amount of people that even the people that live around you don't really know about. Like your parents don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, you have access to the world, so you can figure out what parts of the world want and then serve it to them. But yeah, with YouTube, it's definitely spread yourself across multiple revenue streams. And that's what I was going to say, is that I found that I love the experimentation of just experimenting, and I don't take it too rough. It's I gamify it. Like, hey, let's try out shorts, or try out this and see if it works. And then if it doesn't, it's like, okay. But I've noticed that a lot of other people like get very upset. Like they're like, oh, it didn't work, I'm a failure or whatever, because they're putting themselves out there on the internet, and that's scary when you do that. But I think I've done it so much, and maybe I'm a little bit older now that I don't care about it. You're going to say I was a little bit older?
No, I was going to say like, yeah, because, well, sure. But what I meant by that is I think you kind of know who you are a little bit more. You don't tie your identity to like these other random people on the internet validating who you are.
Yeah. I guess that's why it probably goes against what I said earlier about be careful with social media. I guess it definitely does matter when you're younger and impressionable, and like you're not comfortable in your own skin yet. It can be devastating, if people say negative stuff about you on the internet. And I noticed that when I was working at one of my previous jobs, there were other people. I was working on a YouTube channel with a group of other guys, and a lot of the other guys were probably like mid-20s. And I noticed that they would get very upset with some negative feedback, or they took things very personally. I'm like, you guys, like, just chill. Like, it's not, this is always going to happen. Like, you're always going to have people that, don't like your stuff. So, but it's tough, but maybe it is an age thing. So I would suggest, if you're going to put yourself out there, definitely Wait till you're in your 30s. Yeah, that's probably the best tip.
Oh, crap.
Except for you. You've got it all figured out.
Do you think about it with your kids? Like, they're still young.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely in the camp where maybe I'm naive, but I get annoyed about that stuff when people are like, don't put my picture, don't put a picture of my kid here, or because I'm like, because what? What's gonna happen? AI bot is gonna kidnap? I don't understand. Like sometimes these people get scared of certain things, and you ask them like, you just logically ask them like, what's your fear of what's gonna happen? Like, what do you think's gonna happen? And they never have an answer. It's just like this fear of the unknown, that something could happen in the future. Like for example, I did 23andMe and I tried to get my parents to do it. And I tried to get my dad to do it.
Okay.
And my dad's like, I don't want to do that. And then my uncle came over and found out I did it. And he's like, oh, now our DNA is in this system. And I'm like, and what? Like, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
You're going to get a health insurance plan denied because...
I think I would push back on that. I think...
I would love to. I would love to.
Yeah, I mean, this is a whole other thing. But I think... I mean, I don't know that much about it, but I think that's one of those that makes probably... I had like a chat with my mom like last week, and I was like, we should not do that. Because yeah, this thing that if you do it, and like kind of your whole family kind of... Well, it's genetics, right? So everybody's genetics, like the closer you're related you are, the more similar it is. And I do think there's a history of data like that being sold to insurance companies or just to whoever.
Yeah.
And I think it just happened recently that 23andMe specifically did that. Like they just sold a bunch of data to who knows really whom. And then you can do
what
really scary stuff. Like you can deny insurance, which based on like risk factors. Oh, you have a risk for whatever disease. And so wouldn't
those insurance companies force you to do those tests anyways if you're like trying to get
their plan? That's kind of the counter argument, I guess. And this is where
it's a good argument.
I don't really know enough about it.
Neither do I, clearly.
But it's just I think I get frustrated when there's a lot of these arguments like, oh, but it just makes it harder, or this already, like a smaller version of this already exists. And I think you can never like prevent things. You can just make it harder.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of things, like if you add friction, it just lowers the amount of people who do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you reduce friction to, I don't know, like sign up to a newsletter, for example, if it's like super easy, well, guess what? More people do it. If you have to jump through a billion links, you've lost most people. And it's true for pretty much everything. The more friction you add, the less amount of people will do it. And it's true for companies as well. And so I think about it in that sense of, it doesn't mean it's impossible. It means it's going to be harder if we slow down these tests and things like that. It's not, I don't have a problem with doing these tests in the first place. Like I think it would be really cool if your doctor's like, hey, you have probably a higher chance of this kind of cancer or something. Like that would be really cool. I think the reality of the business model of a lot of these high growth startups is like they're gonna have to make as much money as they can.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to move fast and break things. And I'm very skeptical of that. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I've been really skeptical on that. Specifically for Gen X stuff is because you can't really erase it or change it. It's not like a password. It's like, oh, my password leaked, let me go change it. Like, first of all, nobody does that, but you can.
Right.
Or like pictures, you sort of should be able to erase it. But we're kind of in this gray zone at the moment where we don't really know where we are.
Yeah.
And so in doubt, I'm like, I don't know.
I definitely think about it for my kids. Like on my old YouTube channel, I would do things and just show my kids and stuff, which I stopped doing that and I took those down because they didn't have the option to do it. Not because I'm afraid of, not because I have this unknown fear, like somebody's going to, I don't know, kidnap them or somebody knows where I live, so they're going to do this. these wild fears and I don't always understand why people have such negative, like some new tool is introduced and people default to the negative, like, oh, the government's going to use this to control us. It's like, or it's an awesome tool that you can use for like 1,000 things that are going to make your life amazing. Like, why is it honestly like, oh, the government's going to kill my, whatever. We got to protect ourselves.
Do you hear a lot of that here in France?
The big thing here is the privacy. Like I try to share, like my wife and my sister-in-law had a lot of pushback when I would like try to share pictures of my kids. They're like,
but there's a law in France that like you can't take pictures of people in the street.
It's serious.
So it's like, this is like a very specific French thing. I don't think there's any other country that has that, but the image privacy laws are very strict here. People really care about that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, I live here. So
I'm just adding some context. Like this is a very specific French thing is what I mean.
Yeah, I've seen the opposite of things that I don't like. I saw something in London or somewhere in the UK of where they had facial recognition cameras in the streets, and there was a guy just walking down the street and he put up a hoodie because he knew there was a camera there and he didn't want to be on it, and then they stopped him and
that's wild.
And I would have been like so angry, the American in me would have like revolted, but that seems quite invasive, you know. So, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. I think it's a nice place to start rounding it off. And as you know, I have the same question at the end as well. I like asking people for a book and a podcast recommendation. And there's two reasons I do that. The first one is there's a lot of just word of mouth. I like hearing about new stuff. We talked about recommendation algorithms and stuff like that, but still the best recommendation is just from someone who tells you, hey, I read this thing. It's pretty cool. You should check it out for XYZ. And then I think it's another way to just learn a little bit more about people and what they're interested in. So it does not have to be anything that we talked about, but just things that you thought were cool and that people should check out.
Well, the book is Vagabonding by Rolf Potts. Have you heard of that one?
No, I have not.
That was a book that kind of quick read. It's great, and I think the author just released a kind of a follow up to it or another kind of version of it that I haven't checked out yet. But that was that was a book that I discovered in my 20s that kind of just was like, wow, I would love, I want to see the world. Just help inspire me to really get out and travel. Podcast, unfortunately, I don't have any recommendations.
That's fine.
I love all of the. There's a bunch of GIS ones, but I'm not going to pimp out your competitors here.
All right, let's do a YouTube channel then.
YouTube channel?
We talked about a few already.
Yeah, Johny Harris. Well, first of all, Felt is the best.
I walked up in that.
Most high quality content. I would recommend you do that. I would recommend you go get the 23andMe test and then go subscribe to Felt. Johny Harris is great, obviously.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, when you get put on the spot, I even put some thought into this before and I still can't think of any YouTube channels. Why don't we ask you, what's yours?
That's a great question.
Somebody's asked you before, right?
Yeah, surprisingly not that like for someone who asks that question all the time, I don't have a on the spot answer.
It's hard on the spot. See?
For a YouTube channel, there's a bunch of really cool stuff. There's this guy who I've really been into his thing. It's like completely unrelated, but one of my favorite books of the past few years in the nonfiction is called Range. I think it's David Epstein is the author. Mm-hmm. And the whole premise is that it's some of the things that we talked about where some of the best ideas and best successful in the term of people who do what they want, not the financial side, successful people come from different topics that they put together. So we were talking about the best documentaries you were saying earlier, they're not from people who did film school. Is they did something else before and then they made a documentary about it, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
And so that book is kind of going deeper into that, of find things that you really like that are as far apart as you can. That's not how he says it. That's how I take it.
Yeah.
And then try to bring them together. And there's this guy on YouTube that I really like. I think it's Gox Art. He's this 19-year-old guy from Mexico who does just drawings and cartoons, but in the most cinematic way I've ever seen anybody do
nice.
it. And he pulls stuff from, like, you see references of shots from like Kubrick and stuff like that. And he's just showing you what he drew that day. But he puts so much thought into the lighting and the camera work and everything. And he does that pretty much on his own. And it's wild. Like a
That's
dude in
cool.
his bedroom that's 19
That's cool.
that just makes these incredible videos. Like, what is the video about? It's like, oh, what I drew yesterday. It's the most boring thing ever, but it's a movie, like cinematic movie level stuff.
That's
And I
cool.
just see people like that. And I'm like, oh, you can do amazing stuff with not that much
Yeah.
if you just have really good ideas. And I just can't get enough of people like that.
YouTube's so great because it's a shared human experience. You know, you
Yeah.
get like a window into other people and what they're doing. It's like, it's great. That's why I always like, you know, I do want to recommend one thing that's not YouTube or podcast related. So and we were talking about the other day is This American Life.
Yeah.
The podcast This American Life, they did a documentary series it was a while ago. And they only did 2 seasons, I think, but it's some of the best documentaries I've ever seen. They're just so powerfully just incredible. Yeah, and I would highly recommend those.
Yeah, you talked about that. Jason, thanks. This
Sorry,
was really
I
cool.
hope I didn't say anything. Hopefully I have my felt job next month too, after this comes out.
No, this was really cool. Thanks for everything, being open, having the chat. This was really cool.
Yeah, thanks for coming over here in my office. Thank you for coming to visit.
Yeah.
It's quality.
Thank you very much for listening to this whole episode with Jason. If you enjoyed this, I want to point you to a behind-the-scenes episode I recorded on my Patreon, which touches on a lot of how we made this episode with Jason and just overall how I make this podcast. I want to show you how I prepare for these conversations, how I find the people I interview and research what to ask, how I run these conversations in the moment, and how we put them together for you to listen. I currently have 2 tiers on Patreon. There's the entry-level one, the cartographer, is a way to say thank you and support it, with your name being in the credits of all the following episodes you will be a sponsor of. The second one, the producer, will give you access to some behind-the-scenes episodes of how this podcast is created and how I make some of the videos I've started working on, and also will credit you at the end of the videos. I'm really thankful to all of those who support me in my work on Patreon and hope you will consider financially support me there. Either way, thank you very much for listening and see you next time. Cheers.